Guten gardening, everybody. Well, if you watched the end of our last video, then you heard me say that we were going to take a little bit of a break around the holidays to take a trip. And we're back. We're back from our break, but that trip led to the topic of today's video, which, if you looked at the thumbnail and looked at the title, you know is all about what happens to an indoor growing space. Well, I should say to our indoor growing space when you go away for an extended period of time. You know, it's one thing to take a vacation in the summer or in the months where you're growing outdoors because you have, hopefully, some natural weather to take care of your vegetables and your fruits, etc. while you're gone. You have that natural sunlight period, etc. I think it's an entirely different animal when it comes to leaving an indoor growing space where everything has to be set up in an unnatural way, in our case because we don't have any natural light coming into our growing area, including the watering, etc. And so to be perfectly honest, I was a little bit more nervous about going on this vacation where we spent, again, 10 days away from this indoor space than I was about our summer vacations that we had this year. But as I get into showing you the results of being away for that period of time, and I'm going to look at the different gardens that we have in here, our GreenStalk vertical garden, our raised bed garden, etc. As I start looking at the results of that, I want to point something out to you. I want to make this very clear. If you have the opportunity to go somewhere with your family, to create memories that you're going to have for a lifetime, to do things that you might not necessarily get to do as your children, for example, get older, if you have children, you've got to take those opportunities. You've got to get out there and enjoy that time. And I'm saying that because this is now the third time, and I feel pretty blessed to be able to say this is the third time this year, or over the past year, where I've been able to spend some time with my family away from home. And I really, you know, I love gardening. Gardening is essential to feeding our family, but those experiences are also essential. And so when the opportunity came to take a little trip out west from Wisconsin, we had to take that opportunity and spend time with family and really make some of those memories. So I want to make that clear as I get into this video that I have no regrets, even though there are pieces here in our garden that may have struggled a little bit. For those of you who are watching this video and you've made it to this point, I'd love for you to let us know what your thoughts are about this, you know, taking some time away as needed and the importance of that. Because if this feels like a sentence to you, meaning that you're tied to it, you can't possibly do anything, I don't necessarily think that's the right approach. Gardening should be cathartic, yes, sometimes frustrating, but it should be something that assists you and not something that holds you back. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what this space looks like now that we're back after those 10 days. I should say that before we left, I did do a nice thorough watering, and I had a light cycle set up to be on for 14 hours overnight and then off the remaining 10 and then back on for 14 hours. And we actually have a couple of different timers here. One is pretty high tech, has lots of settings, lots of features, multiple plugs, and that's great. I actually prefer a more analog version, I guess you could say, of a timer. It's just a lot easier for me. It doesn't have as many plugs, but we have a couple of different timers. I'll put links to them in the description if you're looking for something to use as a timer for your indoor growing space. But I had that timing set up. We had a nice watering before we left, and then it was just in the hands of whatever that time was going to have happen in here. So if we start with our indoor raised bed, when we left, the potatoes were about a foot tall and the beans were about the same. And I had planted some bok choy, some kohlrabi, and some kale in here. And one of the first things I noticed when I got back was that the potatoes had collapsed over and some of the beans had collapsed over as well. So they were actually shading out some of the leaves below. They were also shading out some of those newer transplants over, the bok choy, kohlrabi, etc. So the growth that we got from those newer vegetables was not nearly as extensive as I would have liked. But interestingly enough, Our tomato plants, the volunteer tomatoes that I didn't even intentionally plant, those did better than anything else in terms of growth. I think that some of those are probably about 14 inches tall. So to fix this issue, I have to tie up the beans a little bit. I have to tie up the potatoes, get them tied the whole way back so that they're not covering up those newer greens. And you can see there are a couple of beans on here that have developed to maturity, so a couple ready to harvest, but there should be a whole bunch more. You also probably noticed that some of the leaves on these beans seem a little bit scorched to me. And so I'm thinking maybe a little too much light, but that's something else I'm working with because I've never tried to grow beans underneath that grow light. I've certainly never tried to grow them and left for 10 days and not seen exactly how they were developing. So the first thing I'm going to do with this bed is, of course, get it nice and watered, get that water back going here to keep that all growing. And again, get everything out of the way so I'm not shading any of my vegetables out. Now, if I move past that and we take a look at our strawberries, which are growing in a GreenStalk here, what I've noticed is there are some leaves that don't look great, but for the most part, most of our strawberry plants actually maintained, and we started to see the development of some strawberries. In fact, our first strawberry grown indoors is right here in this video, and I can tell you that right after I harvested this strawberry, I ate it, and it was delicious. A little bit small, but delicious. You can see there are multiple areas where there are strawberries coming in, so that's fantastic as well. I do need to fix some of the lighting up above, so that top layer is struggling a little bit, so I need to get some work done there. Now, if I move over to the GreenStalk that's actually right beside me right now, the GreenStalk in this area, what I noticed is that immediately my potatoes have grown to a point now where they're no longer vertical. I didn't get them all held up. They're actually coming out to the side. They're spread out. I should probably come in and support those, which is something that I typically do anyway. And actually, our second tier, some of the radishes here, those are actually growing the best out of anything. They are, most of them are a nice deep green. There are some that are a little bit wilted. You can see some of that wilting, but they've grown the best. And our middle tier, our third tier here, where we have some sugar beets, those seem to be struggling the most in terms of getting off the ground. So I think I'm suffering from not having quite enough lighting there in the middle. Again, I'm experimenting around with these high bay lights just to see how much light, if we're getting close to enough light there, just being produced by those two high bay lights. And I'm thinking I have to play around with that a little bit as well. The area that struggled the most while we were gone certainly was that top tier. Actually, the radishes in that top tier, I have some that are in pretty good shape. That's nice. I have quite a few that are all shriveled up. Now, I said, you're gone for 10 days, and you can see some of the struggle of some of these plants. But in reality, in my opinion, this isn't the worst thing that could have happened. Again, I have to get in here. I have to get everything watered pretty quickly. I don't want there to be any further damage to these plants because of neglect of watering. So I've got that taken care of. That's a given, I think. Now, one of the things that's a difference maker here is, as I said, I did have those light timers, which means that I was able to still keep a consistent day and night. And I've mentioned this before, I've never really done a cost calculation, but I know that electricity is supposed to be less expensive at night because there's less usage of it in general, so the prices tend to go down some. I'd like to do a little video on the value of having your grow light set to an opposite time period from your day and night. So that's something that's an idea for a video in the future. But you can see, because we had that all set up, really the only thing that we're majorly lacking here is a good watering system for while we're gone. And that's something I'd love to be able to look into a little bit more. We've had a couple of suggestions in the comments as to how we might handle some of that. And of course, there are other methods of growing, some hydroponics that would probably be more effective for leaving for an extended period of time. But I gotta be honest with you, I'm okay with what happened while we were gone, especially since it was such a great trip. But just in general, I think we're in pretty good shape. Now, I've got a lot of work to do this winter. I've got a lot to do indoors here, and I'm going to get that accomplished right now. But this is what happened to our garden when we left for 10 days. And I'm excited to see where we can take our garden for the rest of this growing season. Well, folks, let us know what you did over the holidays. If you feel so inclined, we'd love to hear about that in the comments. And if you have any plans or great starting ideas for the beginning of this year, we'd love to hear about that too. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.